How's it going, everybody? And welcome back to another edition of the Stupid Questions podcast. Today, we're going to be talking with Matt Sharpe for the second time. The last time he was on was episode number 7. It has been at least a year since we talked, and I'm so glad we got to because we talk about a lot of the stuff that Matt is doing with the tempo. If you want to know more about that, check out the show note descriptions. In there, you can find a link to his newsletter, and we talk about politics. We talk about triathlon. We talk about how to balance life, and it is a great conversation. Really appreciate him coming on. So without further ado, I want to introduce you to the man, the myth, the legend, Matt Sharpe. Well, man, thank you so much for coming on. Really appreciate it. Excited to have you on round 2. I was just looking back at when we recorded the first time. That was episode 7, I believe.
Wow.
So, yeah. Yeah. So it's crazy. Time's flying by. It's been over a year, but yeah, man. So I guess first things first, I just want to know like how you're doing. And second, like let's shoot off the breeze about the tempo. What's life looked like for you? I got all kinds of questions for you. But let's start there.
All good here. It's like November now, beginning of November. It snowed today. I've got my parka on here for the snow. Kind of crazy. Generally good. I feel like a lot's happened this year. Biggest thing was my wife, Kirsten Casper, making the U.S. Olympic team for triathlon. We put everything into that, and it was a success getting her there. Race day was a little tough, but that was kind of the big focus for us this year. So that was a huge success. For myself, racing wise, done a bit of racing. I got one more 70.3 in Indian Wells in December. So kind of head down for that and trying to, soak up as much, training as I can the next little bit. Sure. A lot of indoor time clearly coming up.
Yeah, for sure. You're at home right now?
I am. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. When I'm seeing the colors, I'm like, that is a really nice room. It looks almost like a hotel room where you usually have like a window to the right and then like the bed and stuff.
Hopefully you can't see anything else like the floor because it's a disaster.
A little messy. Yeah.
A little messy. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. It's all good, man. It's all good. I just moved into this new house in the apartment, a room in the apartment of this house. And it's still very bare. I'm like trying to put some stuff back there to make it look somewhat interesting, but it's just a bunch of
moved to, is it Reading?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. What's your quick take on Reading? I want to hear about it.
Oh, man. So I did not want to move to Reading. I wanted to move to Bend Boulder. So like that's where I was aiming for that kind of a vibe and feel. But after being here now for, it's like 3 weeks. Been settled in this apartment now for a week and a half. So, man, there's so much to do. So I have trails within a mile running distance of my house. If I want to get to any trailhead, I can do that. And I'm talking like a 50 to 60 mile trails system that you want to jump on the side of the river. I can get to the river. I forget the Sacramento River pathway or bike pathway. It's like, I think total around 30-ish miles one way. So you can go all the way down or all the way up to the Shasta Dam. So like that's gorgeous. And then you can hop off that and do some climbs and you can get to the mountains pretty easily. And then I did like an 80-mile ride the other day, shooting off toward the West Coast, kind of going up toward these weird town names that I don't recognize, but very rural, not many cars, just lots of farmland. And then once you get up on the ridge of the mountains, it's like nothing I've ever experienced out east. So as far as like the triathlon scene, the community's not huge here, but there's ample opportunity. So I foresee a lot of growth happening in the next few years.
Yeah, I've actually had my eye on that area for like a very long time, partly because I'm kind of like, you kind of wonder, if like, things are warming, where's a nice area to be? And I always kind of figured that Southern Oregon, Northern California could be like a really nice kind of spot. Nobody talks about it. It's almost like this area that like in the US that like people don't really know about. Even like I'm from the West Coast Canada and no one has ever talked about that area. So I think you're going into this spot that like, I don't know, to me, it feels like very up and coming, a lot of potential. I'm super psyched for you for sure.
Yeah, thanks, man. Yeah, it's really nice. So just even outside of triathlon stuff really quick, like went hiking near Mount Shasta. There is this place called Black Butte, which is just a butte that's like, I don't know how many miles from the base of Mount Shasta, but we climbed it to the top and there was like 7-8 inches of snow and you can see it just Mount Shasta covered in snow over there. So there's lots of lots of mountaineering opportunities. I'm actually going to scale Mount Shasta with a group that's way more experted than
Yeah,
me in June. So looking
good.
forward to it.
Yeah, maybe do the group first and then the free solo later.
Yeah, yeah. Obviously, in dead of winter.
Mm.
So, yeah, man. Let's jump into the tempo. Like,
Yeah,
you have been doing that. Remind us like how long
yeah.
you've been doing it now, and then what's the latest on everything that's been going on?
Yeah, timeline wise, we've been doing it since December 2022, so we're coming up on the, I guess, 2 year anniversary. Yeah, it's been really successful in terms of, building an audience, a durable, sustainable audience. We're at 10,000 subscribers now. We kind of just dipped under that with a little bit of churn. But yeah, I think, I know you read it from time to time. You've had some great feedback for me, which has been awesome. I think it's a great, you know, resource for athletes of all abilities.
Yeah, for sure.
I get high level athletes like yourself, other pros, say, oh, I enjoy reading, XYZ part or whatever. And then, you have amateurs, age group athletes say, oh, I like, the training tips or whatever. So I feel like in every edition, there's always something for someone.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I like how it's pretty, pretty concise,
Yeah.
content and stuff. So yeah, super excited about, what we're doing with the tempo, always obviously trying to grow more and grow revenue, grow subscribers, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, that's going to be a focus. I think this winter is continuing to find unique ways to grow revenue and then, yeah, keep growing the subscribers, it's not super complicated. You just got to pay, really.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. You're talking about in terms of like getting more subscribers, like pay for
Yeah,
ads
yeah.
to
I
get
think,
it.
the secret with these things is a lot of like paid acquisition, paid ads on like Meta and whatnot,
Mm-hmm.
which is great because you just can reach a very targeted audience, and build your own kind of targeted audience.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I think we do a pretty good job. I don't think it's, I need to do a whole lot more in terms of the content or the editorial. I think we have a pretty good handle on that. So yeah, the next, I guess, year phase I would say is to just try and grow revenue and try and grow subscribers, grow the influence. We're
Yeah,
all
for sure.
influencing now.
Yeah. So a couple of questions, or actually many questions. The first one, when it comes to the content, like, are you doing all of the writing, the curation, the procuring of content to like turn it down? Like, is that still all you?
Yeah, in a lot of ways for sure. I definitely curate a lot of like the links that people, click out on. I do a lot of the writing in terms of like race recaps and kind
Mm-hmm.
of industry news and kind of synthesizing that. But then I also have, I feel like a bit of a roster of contributors.
Oh, cool.
So actually, the last edition we had Justin Metzler, who's a pro triathlete. He gave us his 5 do's, what to do in this off season. So we have another guy, Dr. Jeffrey Sankoff. He's a emergency room physician. He is a triathlete as well himself, and he has his own podcast. And he's contributed some kind of more like sciencey based articles, which that's not exactly my education. So
Sure.
yeah, we have a pretty good roster of these kind of contributors as well. So and yeah, obviously, if people are out there and they think they have something to contribute to the audience, we'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, for sure. And is that like, if you don't mind me diving into just the inner workings of it a little bit more, in terms of like contributions, I imagine now it's like most people are doing it out of the goodness of their heart to like kind of help, or are you looking to like make that almost like a paid thing in the future where you could help pay someone and then they bring in
Yeah,
content?
yeah, definitely. At the moment, we're not paying for that kind of stuff. But definitely, yeah. I mean, I would love to be able to pay experts to write articles for the newsletter and have like consistent presence in
Yeah.
in the newsletter with whoever's writing good stuff. But yeah, these people, it's more just kind of like it's exposure, right? So we have a
Hmm.
very targeted audience, of almost 10,000 triathletes. So, I think we all know how hard it is these days to hit that social media algorithm. So when
Mm.
you're reaching a targeted audience, it's often worth your time to put together some kind of content, engaging content that people might be like, oh, okay, like let's check out this person. And I feel like when I'm getting folks to contribute, I definitely try and, dance a little bit with them in terms of like giving them opportunities to kind of pump their whatever they need to pump. Like Justin, he put in a link for his coaching services and whatnot. So there's a bit of exposure that way too, which I really want to, yeah, I'd love for these people to find, more listeners, more clients, whatever, if
Yeah.
they're contributing. I would love that.
Yeah. So I'm assuming that this question is going to land because I just know from a little bit of experience when you start something, you kind of have a vision in place. And then over time, I think the best business owners or entrepreneurs are kind of able to pivot and shift according to what they figure out. So I would love to hear what your original vision was when you were like day one starting the tempo, and then how that maybe has shifted or changed a little bit or been honed after 2 years.
Yeah, so I guess to dial it back a little further, my brother, he's very heavily involved with these kind of newsletters, and he's the genesis of me doing this. He's like, "Hey, you should do one of these," and yeah. So I think originally he does a lot of like local newsletters, and so I think originally I was kind of with the newsletter, I was basically trying to just like give the facts and whatnot. But then, I think as we've gone through the process and learned from other media entities, people want the facts, but they
Hmm.
also want to be entertained a little bit. So, in the newsletter, I'll always try and provide the facts of the race or what's going on in the industry, but then I'll always give my opinion in some ways called the Tempo's take.
Hmm.
So and I think honestly, people do. That's what brings people back. You can get the facts anywhere these days. Gathering news isn't really a super special thing anymore.
Sure.
Anybody can kind of do that. So, yeah, by giving our opinion, and I feel like I've learned a lot in the industry and whatnot. And obviously, coming from a racing background, I have authority to talk about racing dynamics and stuff. But
Sure.
yeah, I think now I feel like I'm confident in giving my opinion and it being worth people's time to pay attention to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when it comes to opinions, speaking of opinions, like for example, if you're coming up with a new design for something, like usually, you'll send out maybe to a few people who you value their opinions. You'll ask them, "What do you think about this?" And at least for me, like I've always been like, okay, I think most people are going to choose this. And then sometimes it's completely different, but it's never easy to just say like, oh, this is the definite area I should take. How do you parse through all the opinions that people may write in and say, hey, this would be good. Hey, this would be good. Like, how do you choose which things to implement and which not?
Yeah, like I feel like I don't get a lot of like I have people interact with the newsletter like with when they're commenting on polls or um maybe they see something or whatever. And I always try and get feedback on what they like, what they don't like. I don't actually get a lot of that. I actually would like to get more because then it's just good information. But yeah, like I feel like I don't get too much, I guess, criticisms or whatever, but I'm always, trying to figure out like I think a lot of the people really like the training tips. So yeah, I try and put some good, content in there and put a lot of energy into that. Yeah, it's I guess like you try to take the what people are saying and then do your best to filter out what makes sense. People are
Mm,
always gonna have some crazy advice, crazy opinions, and you kind of have to be realistic and really hone in on what you actually think will be effective.
yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's fascinating to me just from a couple of other small businesses that I've started in the past. Like
Yeah.
there's this beginning phase where the early adopters will kind of jump on board and they love it, and all they can seem to can give you is like good feedback, and then you're like
Yeah.
looking for the more of the critiques, and then you grow to a point, and I haven't experienced this, but I've heard from others, like once you get to a certain point, it's like the people who become the loudest are the negatives. Maybe not
Yes.
always, but that stuff stands out a lot more. So it's like, at that point you're like, oh, I just have to kind of shut it off. At least I've heard that from bigger podcasters, influencers, and that kind of stuff. um I guess this is just more of a statement, a kind of an observation. I haven't figured out why exactly that is, but I almost imagine if it may be just best to just shut it all off at some point, and then just like kind of do what you can and have an open mind. But like, I don't know. I think it's going to be hard for me to figure that out, I guess is what I'm saying, is as we grow.
Yeah, no, and I think over time, experiment with putting certain content or whatever, and yeah, actually, this is probably an interesting anecdote, but I think it was like 2023. Um, I remember it was like Ironman changed their rules on transgender athletes, and one of my subscribers, who's really dedicated subscriber, she said she wanted to write something about this because she feels passionate about
Mm-hmm.
transgender rights and all that kind of stuff. And I said, sure, like I'm happy to provide I guess a platform for that. And I don't actually regret doing that because I think it was a good lesson all around. But yeah, there was a lot of, I guess, pushback to what
From the
she
community.
said and stuff. And I tried to, say, hey, this isn't the view of the, newsletter or whatever. But yeah, I think, that's a good kind of example of, you try different things and
Mm-hmm.
yeah, you get that feedback. And, I guess we learned through that, like, hey, we're going to try and avoid any kind of political stuff because that's not really our lane. We're talking about triathlon, getting
Yeah.
people, optimized for training and, fun things in the sport. And we don't need to travel down that road because I'm not an expert in any of that. I don't think I have a great opinion, educated opinion on certain things. And so, yeah, we were kind of, it was a good learning lesson for sure.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's an interesting take. So I can see where you're coming from with what you're doing, like because it's very niche and specific. But I almost want to push back on that a little bit because I
Yeah.
think that in that public discourse, which it's different with the newsletter, and I have not operated one, so I'm not saying that this
Yeah.
is
No.
like definitely the way to go, but it seems like I really value that you would do that because with the transgender stuff, like I have pretty strong and formulated
Yep.
opinions for, thinking like, yeah, in women's sport, like probably not a good thing, and I can go down the list of reasons. Um, but I've thought about that quite a bit with the podcast because I'm a relatively opinionated person. And now after, almost close to 100 episodes, like I've started to gain enough confidence to kind of, when people ask, share what I'm truly thinking and feeling. And I had a pretty deep conversation with Cody Beals, with him being a gay athlete, and kind of some of his views, and did not agree with him on quite a number of fronts. But at the
Yeah.
same time, I want to somehow continue to have those conversations and then
Hmm.
become, even though they're going to always be uncomfortable, but have more people on like that. Because I think for me, especially with the way I grew up, it's so interesting to it's not interesting. It's hard to have those conversations and just ask what you're thinking and feeling because we're all afraid. Oh, we're going to offend somebody. But I think really when
Yeah.
we come about it the right way, like we can all learn something from each other, and I don't have to like understand something and think it's right for that person to be valuable on the other side of the table.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. No, it's a good point. And I think, yeah, and I kind of alluded to this earlier, but like in this kind of media environment, yeah, definitely having opinion one way or the other, strong one, people are going to gravitate towards that. And I think that's kind of, in our algorithm based world, having a strong opinion
Yeah,
usually
it
hits the
floats to the top.
algorithm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm actually kind of curious if, when through your podcasting journey, if you've done a lot of episodes now, like it has doing certain conversations or certain things like, I guess, hit better. And do you kind of change your, I guess, perspective, or do you change your like the way you go about it, or are you just, doing your thing and that's it?
Yeah, so to answer your question in a few different ways. I do watch the analytics. I try not to let
Yeah.
them dictate how I do anything. I just find it interesting because, like, whenever I'm looking at the graph, even I could probably share it here. People might find that interesting. But
Yeah.
there's several people we've had on where it jumped. Like in the very beginning, I'm trying to remember who the first person was. I think it was actually Nick Goldston, where we had
Yeah.
like our first jump. And that makes sense because of his podcast audience. And then the next one, big one we had, I think, was when I had Eric on, and then it grew a ton.
Yeah.
And then Ari Clow was another
Yeah.
one, and that one grew a ton. And so but then there's been a few others too where they've just popped up, and I don't even necessarily know it's because of the content itself. Like I've only listened to one episode myself for a couple of reasons.
Yeah. Yeah.
One,
For
I
sure.
don't
For
like
sure.
listening to myself talk, and
No,
then
I know. Yeah, it's classic.
so
That's
there's
classic.
that. But I have taken a lot of disciplinary inspiration from Joe Rogan and beginning, and like I don't share a lot of the same views that Joe does, but I do really share the value that don't let the data dictate it. Play the long game. And I've grown more in that way on the entrepreneur space. It's like, you know what? I tried to force things so much when I was younger. Now it's just like, I'm going to do what I like to do. And if people like it, great. If they don't, that's okay. Like, even if I had no downloads after this episode and it went down to 3, I think I'd still continue to do it because just like the conversation, and I'm not saying that it would be low because of you, Matt. I'm saying,
well, no, of course not, of course not.
No, I really promise I'm not saying that. But if it had none, I would still continue to do it because the friendships that I've been able to make and just the perspective I have been able to grow based on living kind of through all these other experiences has been super valuable. And I think people can learn a lot from that, even if it's only a few people. If they, come on the other side of that a little nicer or whatever, then I think it's worth it. So yeah, I don't really change it up.
Cool.
It's definitely a balance.
It is about the friends we make along the way.
Man. Yeah, it truly is. And
I love it.
Yeah, it's I don't know if you found this to be true or false, but the more I've gotten into this industry, I guess is really what could be called now, is there's a lot of positivity, but there's a lot of this like kind of, I don't want to say underhanded, but kind of backroom talk about how people deal with things, especially around the topics of like sponsorship. And
are you talking about triathlon or podcasting?
Sorry, I'm talking about triathlon.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Because like that's what I've delved into the most heavy with the professionals and the different brands, and it's just people I find interesting. But I've seen some of that underhandedness. And I don't know if it's like prevailing. Like I haven't done a lot of contracts, but I've heard through the rumor mill and seeing some things that I've helped like set up an introduction, and then someone kind of gets not treated correctly, and it's like, that's kind of a hard thing to deal with. It's kind of taken the rose-colored glasses off for me a little bit of like, okay, well, this is still a group of people, and we're all human. So yeah.
I would be curious though, like I feel like this is in every industry, like it's not just triathlon. I feel like
I thought we were perfect.
No, sorry, definitely not perfect. We're crazy actually. But yeah, no, I honestly think that's something that's probably pervasive in all industries. You're always going to have shady folks or whatnot. Yeah, that's just how it is. I think that's my opinion.
Yeah, it's a growing sport,
kind of like human behavior.
Yeah, it really is. And I think also because triathlon's in this kind of, not infancy, but like teenager phase of the sport, I feel like there's a lot of big money starting to come in and dabble in with the opportunity of, turning a profit. So then you have a lot of these VC firms that are coming in and propping up some of these things for the opportunity at the future.
Propping is the correct verbiage there, I think.
Oh, yeah, it's definitely propped up. There's so many companies that I've gotten to kind of look under the hood a little bit. I'm like, all right, so what's the longevity plan with this? Like, I know that somebody is losing millions a year, and maybe they're a billionaire, and maybe they're ready to play the long haul, but what are we going to do? Like, when is it going to happen? And the thing I keep hearing is, when there's a huge TV deal that gets done, and like, that'll be... So.
I'm curious, as like someone who, like, when did you, I guess, like, now that you're kind of into the sport and understand, those various professional dynamics or whatever, like, what is your opinion of like, T100 versus Ironman versus, super tri or whatever? Like, do you actually like follow any of them really?
I mean, in terms of like, it depends on what you mean by follow. Do I go and watch all of the races? No. The ones that I, watch the most, I think is going to be the Ironman stuff. I watch a couple T100s every now and then. But I think that's kind of, there's a few variables there at play for why I'm interested in one over the other. Ironman was the first thing that I ever came in contact with. I am an age grouper, and there's a lot to be said about that experience for the first time in the brand that brought me. So I think that's one reason why I'm more inclined to that. T100 feels like a Silicon Valley startup with a lot of flash and pomp and like, we're signing big money. I think it did better for the longevity of its goals. I think it was more in line when they were first starting out as the PTO, and it was a bit more grassroots. Now, because it is so incredibly overproduced, which, don't get me wrong, like I think it's a great opportunity for a lot of athletes to have the money, but you can see by the decisions that people are making, the athletes that are racing and aren't racing, like where the value truly lies and where they're, where the because a lot of people do. I think a lot of the professionals, and maybe you can say this, speak to this because it could be incorrect, but I think a lot of the professionals do it because still they love it, not because of the money.
Yeah.
And the passion for Kona or the passion for, a 70.3 world champs, there's a lot more brand clout and it's almost religious in a
Yes.
way. We're still worshiping Iron Man a little bit because they were the ones we first got to interact with. So I
Yep.
don't know. We'll see. I don't see how T100 can last much longer. I know Iron Man's been passed around the private equity world so many times, and there's the debt gets sold how many times in the past 10
Yeah.
years. So it's just like, it's
Yeah,
all kind of
it's
weird.
interesting. I mean, I like hearing your perspective on, the kind of different industry players and whatnot. Because ultimately, folks like yourself, where you choose to race, like that is going to dictate who survives and who doesn't. And yeah, Ironman, I mean, yeah, they're the monopoly, right?
Hmm.
And so so it's great to hear your perspective because yeah, it's more information.
Yeah, yeah, right about it. Well, yeah, Seth said no.
That's
It's a
sad.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. No, it's good though, man. I think that they'll find their place. I mean, with Super League or Super Tri, like it's bigger in Europe because the culture is bigger in Europe.
Yeah.
Like that's just what's going to happen. I know Nick Chase. I won't say the specifics because I don't know who wants
Yeah,
me to share. But when they were
for
trying
sure.
to bring some of that to the U.S., like there was this basically like, okay, we'll give you the brand, but you raise all the money. And then finding money in the US to be invested in something that has, like our high school and college programs aren't even anywhere near enough to kind of funnel through, I
Yeah.
think, those programs. So it's chicken before the egg problem. And I think all tides are rising. So I don't want to speak
Yes.
too down on it.
No, no, it's definitely a great time to be a pro for sure. Great time for an age grouper to have different options. Yeah, at the moment, you've got Super Tribe. They've made a huge push into the U.S., successful in some ways. They lost Malibu. They had this issue with the New York City Triathlon, so they've had some stumbles, but they're definitely going all in on the U.S. in a lot of ways, it seems. And then you have T100, which they're making these big races. They're trying to as well make a push into the US.
Mhm.
So yeah, you have these two competing forces, and usually with competition, people benefit in a lot of
Sure.
ways. So yeah, I'm curious to see what it looks like, the landscape looks like, in 2028. That's kind of
Mhm.
uh, the next kind of signpost in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Yeah, the next few years is going to be very interesting to see how it shakes out. T100, you hear rumors, oh, they run out of money, blah blah blah. But then, the people who are funding it, yeah, they've got too much money that they know what to
Deep
do with. So
pockets.
really, like, yeah, and they have. It seems like they have the breathing room. Before they wanted to just go into TV and just get the TV rights, which was never going to happen.
Hmm.
And now, they're pivoting towards events pretty hard, and it seems like they have the, I guess, bandwidth or runway, as you would probably say,
Yeah.
to be able to do that. So, yeah, if they can kind of land the plane in the next couple of years, then yeah, they could definitely be a different option to Iron Man. I don't think they'll ever overtake Iron Man, but in some ways, I think they're trying to, yeah, obviously run these events, but in terms of the pro stuff, in my mind, they're trying to position themselves as kind of like the F1 of triathlon. They're trying to make it a little
Yeah.
more sexy, bring in those big sponsors. They haven't got them yet, but that's, they want to see,
Yeah.
Oracle. They want to see Red Bull,
Yeah.
all these kind of guys come in. So that's, I think, the lane. If it's going to work, that's the lane that it's going to be.
Yeah, it's interesting. You made the Formula One. I think is definitely what they're going for, especially with like
Yes.
the font, the forward-leaning italics, the sharp edges, the color schemes. Like,
Everyone
yeah,
wants Drive to Survive. Everybody wants to be Drive to Survive.
it's
Did
so
they?
funny.
Yeah,
It's
well,
such.
I mean, F1, they got bought by a media company, and the media company, they knew what they were doing, and yeah, they've built this whole thing. Where T100, I don't know, and PTO, like their roots, I don't know if it's necessarily in building these media entities and whatnot, but yeah, we'll see.
Yeah, we will see. So for you, what going back to the tempo a little bit, what has been the hardest part for you in just what the tempo is?
I don't know. I mean, I really enjoy doing it because I enjoy the sport. So like, why wouldn't I want to like I'm already taking in this information. I might as well share it, right? But some days it's just hard. Like it's like training. It's like, some days you have good days, some days you have bad days.
Hmm.
It's the whole entrepreneurial journey is not the easiest for sure. It's a lot of uncertainty, all that kind of stuff. And yeah, so I guess just like typical entrepreneurial stuff. It's you don't know exactly, what the landscape's going to look like next year, in terms of like partners and everything. So yeah, you're trying to manage that. Yeah,
What does victory look like for you?
I've the last little bit, and like I feel like the last couple of years, my vision, I would love to be kind of like the Wall Street Journal of endurance media, or like
Yeah.
I don't know if I want to just be stuck with triathlon or whatever. I don't want to put a ceiling on what this thing could be. But yeah, that's kind of maybe like Wall Street Journal, front office sports a little bit. I enjoy talking about the industry stuff and seeing what's going on, big pictures. So yeah, I feel like that's kind of the big vision. But again, like we talked about before, you don't know what that actually is end up looking like, because you probably actually don't want the mental model of what the Wall Street Journal is, because that's from a different era. So
Mm,
maybe, I guess the equivalent, but whatever that looks like in the 2020-ish context.
yeah. It could be something like what is that? InfoWars.
Yeah,
You know this.
exactly.
You could
Yeah,
be
we're
the
the
Alex
InfoWars of
Jones of
endurance.
endurance sport.
Yeah, that guy gets clicks,
Oh man, he does.
he gets those clicks, gets those lawsuits too.
Yeah, he does. Sheesh,
So you got
man.
to ride that line, I guess, a
Yeah,
little
it's so
better. He did.
interesting. Oh well, do you mind if we talk politics for a second?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I'm the next day of the U.S. election. I don't know if you planned that. Bring the Canadian on, probably the worst, or maybe not as good as
No, it's
somebody
so
else.
good. I saw it for last night. I spent way too much time like watching results, and I'm talking to
When
all
did you
my
go to bed
friends.
last night?
I went to bed Pacific time at 11:30, which
Oh,
is
nice.
like,
Okay, you weren't up that late. I was up.
well, for me, dude, that's like 3 hours too
Oh,
late.
well, gee, yeah, that's decent. That's decent. I was in bed like around that time too. I,
Yeah,
I definitely was asleep. Yeah, hectic, hectic.
yeah.
What's your quick take?
Quick take. Wow, can you even have a quick take with this stuff? Like when it comes to politics, so I'm not. I wouldn't consider myself a very hugely political person. Um, I didn't get to vote. I'm from Tennessee, so I could have done like a mail-in right before I'm switching my residency. It wouldn't have mattered really.
Yeah,
I mean, people say probably would, but whatever, because
yeah,
Tennessee's
for
definitely
sure.
going to go red. And then I moved to California, and it was already called. The state was called before they even posted the
Yeah,
numbers. Like I thought that was hilarious. So,
that one's
so
baked in.
yeah, so I wasn't changing anything there. I would have voted for Trump. Do
Yeah,
I like Trump as an individual? Um, I think it's kind of 50-50. I wouldn't consider him to be like an upstanding character of a man.
yep,
However, when it comes to the policies that were enacted in the past and the things he's talking about in the future, um, I am more in line with those. It's tough for me because like I've been to China. I've done manufacturing in China.
crazy.
I love the Chinese. Don't get me wrong. I don't love communism. I don't love what they've done with like the Uyghur Muslims and
Yeah,
the stuff that they do out in the open. But at the same time, and on the same token, I don't love a lot of stuff that America does. There's a lot of things that we do shady
yes,
constantly that
yeah,
people don't want to admit that we do, especially post World War II.
yeah,
So there's a lot going on there. Um, with the tariff situation, that's from a business perspective and policy perspective. I'm like, yeah, that could be tough because I'm having some stuff made in Asia right now, some samples, a little teaser there for this
oh,
bike bag. And,
oh,
just so everybody knows, like, I'm talking, if I order a small batch of these things, it's like $2. And he's talking about tariffing everything like 100%. So if it was going to double my cost for something like that, it's going to cost around 50, $60 or whatever.
yeah,
It's not going to be like impossible. But if I ever wanted to make something high end again, like it would be tougher to do. Um, and that kind of stuff is tough when diving into it because when it comes to soft goods, sewing,
yeah.
if this bores you, let me know and I'll quit
No,
talking
keep
about it.
going. I'm learning. I feel like
Okay, so
we're all
when it comes
learning.
to soft goods, like sewing things, like jackets, garments, anything that like has
Yeah,
material, the skilled labor here in the U.S., while there is some, I don't want to say there's none.
yeah, yeah,
It's very few and far between. So let's just pretend for a second that the tariffs hit, and everything becomes impossible to get made overseas, and we have to do it in the U.S. Well,
yeah,
the issue at that point is like, okay, well, we're how are we going to fulfill the demand? So what's going to end up happening? And me, in the conversations I was having with big brands and companies I know where they are in charge of manufacturing, they were looking at, okay, well, if we wanted to fly in and move people here from Asia, that skilled labor. We would sponsor their visa. We would do
Yeah.
all this stuff. We wouldn't necessarily pay them, what they would be paid in Asia, but we'd still be able to pay them a little bit lower, and it would still be a jump up for them. But really,
Oh,
at the end of the day, we're still paying the Chinese
yes.
to a degree. So like, that it's again a chicken before the egg problem. It happened at such a gradual way with all of the manufacturing being shipped elsewhere
Yeah.
in the 60s, 70s, 80s that it just becomes really hard now, because if we want to put everything back in the US, let's just talk soft goods only because that's what I know.
Yeah.
You're looking at like at least 10, 15 years before you can train that workforce or even find interest
Yeah.
to train those types of jobs again. And man, I worked in the factories over there with them, and I went over and watched these ladies who have been sewing
You're on the
since they
ground
were
floor. You're on the factory floor
yeah,
watching them do their thing.
yeah, like 13, 14 years old is when they started, and they really do like that job. They put in their phone, they listen to a
Yeah.
podcast, and they go to town. Like that skill is going to be hard to transfer over here. So for that kind of stuff, it makes it a bit difficult. But man, when it comes to just like the overarching hot take, really quick, and then I want to hear your thoughts, is I believe that this kind of awakening of cultural Christianity, and there's like more talk about church, and we need to come back to spiritual values and Christian values and yada 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 yada. While we were, I think, as a nation in the beginning, built on this principle of no separate church and state, there was like a cultural significance to the Christian belief
Yeah.
system that I think afforded success. But however, because things have changed so far now, I think that as that comes back into our society, you're going to see a swing towards a religious extremism where you will see persecution of
Dude.
in between, why people believe what they believe, to the point of saying like, hey, you have to go to church or you're going to, be penalized in X way. I think that's what will happen, unfortunately,
You
because
think that's coming down the line?
I think that is coming down the line. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, I think the pendulum continues to swing and it gains
Sure.
momentum with every swing.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think unfortunately that is where we're headed. But it gives the people the opportunity, I think, because I am a believer in God, to like
Yeah.
start to think about, what does that actually mean to people? But if you don't have that one-on-one relationship, again, my opinion and belief, then it can be easily deceived, because some of the greatest atrocities over our history have been done
Yeah.
under the banner of religion.
Yes, for
Constantine,
sure.
the Pope, like you name any of
Yeah.
them. Yeah. Your
Yeah. No,
response.
it's, I feel like that's a little, I don't know. I don't know if it's going that far. I feel like, I don't know. Personally, I don't think it'll get to that point. I don't know. America, I feel like has, uh, maybe there'll be a resurgence, but I don't think, people will be persecuted for what they believe or whatever. I don't believe that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I guess like being here, and I still don't have my green card. Am I worried that personally, I'm not going to be accepted in the end? No. But I can understand how if you were here and you're working, and hoping to, stay in the U.S., maybe you've been on a green card for a number of years. Yeah, I could see how you'd be worried, about just being booted out. I think that's an issue, especially for skilled people who
Hmm.
could probably benefit the country. Yeah, overall, last night you didn't just win the electoral college, won the popular vote. I'm pretty sure, unless our
Yeah. No,
votes.
by
So
a lot, a lot.
by
I
a
mean, it's
lot.
all,
And so,
yeah.
I think before there was always this like, oh well, a majority of the country doesn't believe in this, or there won't, didn't vote for him. And yeah, there's that. But then now that's not the case anymore. So it's like, well, okay, if a majority of the country is, voting a certain way, then yeah, then clearly there's something in there. And I think a lot of folks, like I'm a fairly liberal person, but I can understand why people, would go down that road and want to vote for him, especially, I think on the whole inflation thing,
Hmm.
any government that really suffers from inflation, the next election, usually they're gone. And I think it's been so pervasive, at least for us, for in the grand scheme of things, it probably hasn't been crazy, but for a lot of us who grew up in such a low interest rate environment for so long, having this inflation really was like a huge shock. And ultimately, I think, you know, even if Trump isn't going to really do much or has much control over it, I think the perception of him making it better and whatnot, that won out the day. all the other stuff, yeah, I think it was just it's little bits in here and there, but I think in a big picture, why people voted the way they did was because of inflation and
Hmm.
because Kamala didn't really necessarily represent change from the administration. Like she was there for the 4 years,
She
right?
was
And then
invisible,
she was there. Yeah, well, she was
literally.
there. And so yeah, I think people you know say, well, what's she actually going to do? Should have done something in these four
Hmm.
years, and yeah, she probably didn't get handed the best situation where it was so quick. But yeah, inflation and then just no lack of or perceived change. That's
Yeah.
my hot take.
Yeah. Would you have voted, or did you vote? Oh, you're Canadian.
I just showed up to the place and they
Yeah.
gave it no.
Well, if you come to California, all you have to do,
There
you
we go. There we
literally,
go.
yeah, you don't have to
Um,
show anything.
yeah, no, I didn't vote. I would have voted for Harris. Just for me, I think deep down, I was in America and I watched the scenes of January 6th, and that was appalling to me. People are like, oh, he didn't say for them to go, but he was saying things that made people go. Like
Sure.
that's the
Yeah.
reality. He
He was
called,
he was motivating.
he was motivating. He called the Georgia guys, said, find me the votes. He's trying to overturn the results of the election. And to me, that's disqualifying. So, yeah, if democracy is the biggest thing, if you're trying to undermine that, and I don't know, that for me, that was, yeah, that was it. But we'll see. He's back in power and we get to experiment for another 4 years and
Yeah.
see what that looks like.
Yeah, it's so interesting. I
We're A/B testing. We're A/B testing different things, and that's good and bad, I guess.
yeah, and I mean, it has some good aspects. Yeah,
Do I think America's like screwed? Absolutely not.
no,
No,
the
in a
people
lot of
make up
ways,
America.
things are going to be getting better, even if Trump's not involved. Like
Yeah.
just in a big picture, we have this huge, I guess, demographic wave of folks like us, right? Millennials who are entering their prime earning years and who are starting families, blah blah blah, and that's huge, just in terms of like growth. Like
Yeah.
Trump has no control over that. No one has control over that. That's just a great thing to be a part of.
Yeah.
Yeah, interest rates are coming down. Yeah, he's not supposed to have control over that. So, you
Not
just
supposed to. Have
these are
you
just
read?
good tailwinds for, I think, America, and hopefully Canada can kind of catch on to that a little bit because we've been struggling quite a bit, obviously, as well.
Hmm. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Have you heard of the book The Creature from Jekyll Island?
No.
Oh, so it's about this thick. And to be honest, I've only read this much of it.
Okay,
But
you've read it. I haven't read it.
I have read some of it. It is the origin story of the Federal Reserve.
Mm,
And the Federal Reserve is not a government run organization, even though it's called
yeah.
federal. And it just kind of it shows how, in its opinion, but citing, I mean, it is very well cited.
Yeah.
All of the things that happen to kind of lead to the creation of such a thing and get itself the gold standard and the money manipulation. When you get into that side of stuff, it's like, I mean, the best way to just describe it, I think, is like looking whenever we get a paycheck, we go on and we log onto a screen, and there's a few pixels on that screen that show us numbers, and that's now what we assign value to. And whenever that comes to zero, like we all freak out. So it just kind of goes to show like getting away from value and having perceived value in everyone's mind, and then the ability to manipulate that. And just what banking is, modern day banking is just, it's truly robbery from people. It is absolutely nuts.
Yeah. I mean, I guess they haven't found a better system, or maybe things are kind of evolving, but yeah, it's what we got right now.
Yeah, for sure. So I would be curious to hear about your thoughts on this, because this is a thing that's been concerning, and then we can move on to a different topic if you want.
Yeah.
There's this whole topic of when Trump was in office the first time, he said, like, oh, I could have put her in jail. Like he could have, like, locked her up because of criminals, things that came out to be true, like she did do. But then he said he didn't do it because, it wouldn't be good for the country. And, and that's been a talking point now, that like, that's almost a good thing. But that is like so against me, because I think that no one should be above the law, because the law
Yeah.
is already the lowest standard of a
Yeah.
moral person. But now, like, we are almost codifying and elevating this, like, as if that's a virtue.
Yeah.
Like, oh, I didn't put that person in prison even though they broke the law because it wouldn't look good for America. It's like, if my family member goes out and murders someone, I may love them to death, but I am not going to
Yeah.
defend them for what they did. Like that's just, what do you think about that?
It kind of goes back to what you were talking about before, where, like you talked about how America, or since post World War II, I mean, before that anyways, but, has done some shady things, I guess in the benefit of America.
Many
That's
shady
messy.
things.
Yeah, shady things, killing people for sure. Yeah, yeah, it's like I'm no, expert in morality or anything like that. Definitely, if you're breaking the law and your intent is to hurt people, whatever, like you got to get punished for that, right? Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
That's my personal thought. Yeah, yeah, for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah. We'll see what happens. I really hope that we get
Like
with it.
you're talking about him kind of going after people who's
Yeah, like
wronged
him saying
him.
like not going after like all of the things they've done that have
Yeah,
been illegal and wrong, like Joe Biden and
yeah,
all the things that could be listed because both sides of the table are underhanding each other and
yeah,
backstabbing. And there's, I mean, war is the most profitable thing that is in the world right now, unfortunately. So everything
yeah,
that's going on, like there's just so many shady things. Yeah, it's almost overwhelming, I think, to the common person to be able to even feel like that they have a voice. We do get to vote, yes,
yeah,
but the way that the system is gamed with two parties, and
yeah,
there's no room for like a moderate, truly, or another party. Like it becomes very difficult for people to, I think, get in line and feel like that they can actually make a change. But yeah, those kinds of things like that, it just truly bothers me. I'm like, if we're claiming to be like this coming back to Jesus moment, it's like,
yeah,
okay, except for this is really
yeah, right.
big.
Yeah. No, for sure, for sure. It's a lot to take in, and yeah, we'll see. I mean, if he's trying to unite the country, I guess going after folks, rightly or wrongly, maybe that's not the way to unite the country. I don't know.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
I'm not in the administration, so I don't have to make these decisions.
yeah. Thank goodness. I mean, same for me. I don't know. I've always wondered like what I would do. It's just interesting with famous people or people who have notoriety. Like I've never met Donald Trump. I doubt I'll ever meet him or any
Yep.
of these like high political figures or even like movie stars and stuff. But it's so easy to really cast a judgment when you're standing on the outside and you lack the context for what's going on. Because, for example, I'm going to have on my wife's like I think it's his second or third cousin. We call him Uncle Carl, but anyway, he was
Nice.
in the Rwandan genocide,
Oh wow.
the only American there during that, and he witnessed all of it. And
Yeah.
he was at an orphanage. I'll just tell a story really quick. And the people who were massacring were coming to basically wipe out this orphanage of all kids, machetes in hand, and they were waiting for the call of this basically general to say like, yes, do it or don't do it. And so Carl got into a car, went down to the headquarters where they were setting up shop and kind of their operating base. And he asked to talk to him as like, one who was helping these people. And he just so happened to have like this interaction in the hallway where he talked with somebody who introduced him to this, I think it was General. Um, and because the General liked him, he called off this massacre. Now, so like that is not a black and white situation. And that messed with me so much because, minutes earlier, this man was out in the streets with machete hacking people to death. But
Yeah.
then because he liked this person in this moment, he decided not to wipe out all of these orphans. And like millions of people have died. There's estimations there are even more than that. And so it's so not black and white. And there's war, especially. It's I'd love for it to be black and white because
Yeah.
there's good and there's bad, but you hear stories of good and atrocities of evil on both sides, and even from the same person. And so it's like when you're talking about politics or any famous person, they make a judgment or they have an action, and we judge them, and we lack the context to fully understand. And as kids, I think when we're growing up, everything is black and white. We
Yes,
trust our
of course.
parents. Parents are
Yeah.
good, but then you get older and you realize, oh man,
Oof.
like it's a
A lot
very
of
gray
gray, a lot of
world.
shades of gray.
Yeah. So
Yep. I'm curious. Yeah, it's a crazy story, by the way. Yeah, I can't even imagine being in that situation.
yeah.
Um, I am curious if we elected Seth for president,
Oh my word.
if you were the guy, what would you do? What would be your first thing or your biggest priority, or what would you do? You're president right now.
Oh man. Um That is such a deep question. I honestly don't know what I would do. I think it would be overwhelming because the amount of people who have been there for many years who are not
Yeah.
just installed for 4 years. Like I've met a few politicians and I understand like there's some who I've talked to and it's like you're not talking to a human. You're talking straight through them and they're talking straight through you. They
Yeah.
have this face and like you can't connect with them. It's very hard to like get on that level because it's so political. Like everyone
Yes.
wants to keep this image. So I think what I would do is honestly, being a guy who relies on like my relationship with God, I think I would do a lot of prayer and a lot of reading of historical events and people and trying to understand why people act the way they act, and
Nice.
then try to find as many wise people who I could trust to help advise me. But I think that's what honestly I
Yeah.
don't see many presidents going in and being like, all right, I'm going to screw this country up. Like I think
No,
everybody goes in with a decent intent, but then you
for
come
sure.
out being manipulated and deceived and chewed up by this machine. I mean, that's why
Yep.
they go gray so quickly. It's like
They do. Yeah. They age
everybody's telling you
very
that they have the
quickly.
right answer. So what do you do?
Yeah. No, it's interesting. It's interesting. Yeah. No, super insightful. Yeah. Very cool.
What would you do?
I was thinking from a pure like policy standpoint, but yours sounds much more virtuistic. So, to make it sound bad, but I think one of the biggest things, just my thinking is like the cost of housing for people.
Hmm.
If you don't have access to somewhat affordable housing, you might have to live outside of town or whatever. Um, I think anything to build more housing. So whatever we can do. I don't know which levers you pull on, supply side, demand side, whatever.
Well, we clearly have the money to make that happen.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Maybe it's regulations, just certain regulations you got to chop down, which, probably is not great for environmental stuff. But yeah, I just think if people have access to housing, it just,
mhm.
on like a basic, like, the Maslow hierarchy of needs level, if you can get housing, it's stable housing, then you can progress from there.
Yeah.
It solves a lot of problems because a lot of people coming up now, young people, whatever, older people, like everybody really.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people who struggle with housing, and I think it's something that obviously, if you're building housing, you're growing the economy for sure. So yeah, that'd be my first day one. Build
Yeah,
more housing.
I think that's really good too and virtuous.
Yeah, I
Honestly,
mean, people. I want people on the street. I mean, at the end of the day, we see all this like the rise of like the van life and stuff, and honestly, part of that is because there's
it's
not enough
expensive.
affordable housing.
Yeah, yeah, no, it's interesting.
I don't think people really want to live in their vans. Like some people do for sure, but a lot of people, I don't think they want to live in their vans.
No, man, I lived in a tiny home for 6 years,
Yep.
almost 7 years, and
Right. That's right.
yeah, I mean, a van is even smaller. It would be very difficult. I mean,
Yeah.
just the topic of laundry alone, I'd have to pick like, and this is my two shirts, my two shorts, my two underwears, and I'm gonna wash them every day in the sink and dry them out because that's the only way you can do it. It's like,
Yeah.
it's so crazy. But I was thinking about the housing thing actually the other day because I live in Reading and housing here. They're trying to build more, but it's been kind of a very rocky situation for.
Yeah, it's California, right? So
Yeah.
already it's going to be quite expensive, and I'm sure it's not easy to build there.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's eight.
yeah, but on the topic of like, because what you're talking about, like more regulation, I think I sit more on the opposite aisle a little bit of more
Yeah,
like, we'll let the free market stand because if I do build a bunch of cheap housing, that floods the market and then people can move into that, so that like messes with house prices in a different way. I don't know if
completely.
there's a real good middle ground, because I really don't because
Yeah,
oftentimes when affordable housing is built, it's built like very brick and mortar, square rooms, a few windows,
yeah,
crank them out, and in most cities that ends up being like kind of more of the slum area, so that's difficult. But like if you can make
yeah,
nicer housing, like there's an argument to be made for that. But how would that affect the everyday man who's out there building houses? It's the elimination of the middle class that ends up happening, and that makes it really tough. But on the
hmm
topic of policy, really quick, I was also thinking, because in a small business owning, as you start to operate, you do come up with policies and procedures for things just for the sake of efficiency.
yeah,
Well, the startup that is the United States of America has been running for over 200 years now, and the policy books, I mean, if you were to probably stack up just on pieces of paper, front and back, all the policies that exist, you could probably fill up a football stadium.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
it's
Go to
so
the moon. Go to the
convoluted.
moon. One of those ones.
Yeah, literally. It's so convoluted. So it's like to a
Yeah.
degree, it's almost like let's burn most of it and just restart. It's like you can't, it's such a web of intricacies that you feel like, I don't know, because those bills now, it's like, here's my bill,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. For sure,
sign
for
it,
sure.
please. So,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. No, there you go. Got red tape. Got
yeah,
inefficiencies. Boom.
yeah,
Day one.
yeah. So, Matt, what are you looking forward to in 2025? I know you said for like the tempo, you're wanting to build the subscription list, professional racing. What does that look like for you? Is because um, Kirsten had her Paris games. Is the focus going to be shifting a little bit more on you now, or
Yeah, a little bit. It'll probably just be kind of the pendulum, like you said, the pendulum, right? We definitely swung over there quite a bit, and at the end of the day, um, like we did it, like, and that was the biggest thing. Like, I've been able to race this year. It's done somewhat okay. If I couldn't do any racing, but we still did the thing, then it's mission accomplished. But yeah, I'm sure in some ways it'll definitely swing a little bit further back, and I'll be pursuing a bit more or making more decisions based on like what's going to benefit my racing or whatever. But I still want to help her out as much as I can in a lot of ways. So balancing that, I think tempo, you obviously just want to continue to grow and like in these things, it just every day you're going for base hits. There's
yeah,
really very few and far between home runs. So every day you're trying to get a base hit. So just crank out those base hits and just keep building and see where we're at the end of 2025. Maybe do a couple different things along the way. I'd like to do an event or two with kind of the tempo tied in
yeah,
because I think it'd be fun to, get people in a room and have conversations like this. Yeah. So maybe a bit of that. And then racing wise, yeah, kind of get back into a rhythm, get back into consistent training, and see kind of, how I can progress, my own performance. Yeah, I think I've been doing this triathlon thing for a long time at a fairly high level, but I still feel like I have room to improve over the 70.3 distance, and it feels like still I'm still super keen on pushing myself and kind of experimenting a little bit with training. So yeah, it's fun to run experiments on yourself and see what the results
yeah. Are
give
you
you.
self-coached right now?
Not exactly. No, I work with my coach, Lance Watson. He's in Canada. He's an Olympic gold medal coach from a few years ago. So we work together. He does the programming. I'll honestly make edits at times based on what's going on, like with Kirsten's training, or maybe I'm like, I kind of want to do this a different way. And yeah, we have a really great relationship. It's beyond coach athlete. I'd say we're just really good friends. Yeah, going to continue working with him and try some new things next year for sure. Always the goal for me is to race at a high enough level to be sniffing the podium and beyond podium. So yeah, that's and like we talked about even earlier, meet some friends along the way.
Yeah, 100%, man. Well, I'm looking forward to it and tracking the journey. Do you mind or can you share like a couple of the things that you're thinking about experimenting?
More just like I feel like in the last years, like I've been kind of flying by the seat of my pants a little bit. So trying to get more data.
Mhm.
I did my first lactate test in like 5 years or something, like a couple weeks ago. Shout out Justin Metzler for doing that protocol with me. That was awesome.
Cool.
Yeah, so getting into that a little bit more. I feel like, doing the newsletter and stuff, it gives me a perspective a little bit on like what normal folks try and do with their work and training and stuff. And I have a great appreciation. So I guess trying to experiment and see how how good the ROI for time is on training.
Mm,
So I'm not stacking up those 30-hour weeks, definitely not. But it's what I'm putting into these, 17 to 20-hour weeks and seeing, how good we can do off that. I think that's a fun initiative for me. That's something that gets me fired up to work hard.
yeah. Well,
Yeah.
so how can somebody who is listening who wants to help like support the tempo or help you out? What is the best way to do that?
Best way is just subscribe to the newsletter. If you find it engaging and you think other people will like it, send it on through to your triathlon buddies or whatever. yeah, like I think that's the best way. Anytime someone kind of forwards it to someone else, usually those are really high quality referrals. Usually that's the ones that people are like, oh, okay, like I know someone who like this, and then they know they'll like it, and they usually do. So yeah, just subscribe, check it out. Feedback is always amazing to make us better. So yeah, that's about it.
Awesome. Well, one more question, an advice one. If somebody is trying to figure out how to balance marriage,
Yep.
working, and doing triathlon, those are, I would assume, kind of the three big core things in your life. So maybe you can speak to it. If they're trying to figure out what that balance look like or how it should look, how have you found it to be most effective? What is a
Yeah, I
good
think
way?
always taking a step back and being like understanding the context of your life versus what you see maybe other people are doing or whatever. So, whenever I'm like, oh, I wish I was doing more, blah, 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 just take a step back and, you have all these different things going on. So if you can try and feed them as much as you can, and you know what, sometimes, like, yeah, I was not really training super well for a lot of the summer
Mm,
because I was helping Kirsten, and that's just how it is sometimes. And you got to accept that. You got to accept that you're not going to be able to be dialed in on everything all the time. So I guess maybe that just try and accept that you have your certain context in life, and then try and dial it in as much as you can, knowing some things will need more attention at other times.
for sure. Yeah, that's good advice. I think
Yeah.
also what you said at the beginning really rings true with the, I guess, having the self awareness to look at your own life and see and be true and honest to yourself. Like, what do I need? Because I think for me personally, it's been a temptation and a lot, not even from the social media aspect, from just talking to other friends who I would kind of look up to, kind of trying to do a little click, copy and paste onto my
Hmm.
life and the way that they do time and
Yeah.
things. And I mean, who we're all, our partner, they're all different. Our work environment, the stresses that are in play there, the timing requirements and
Yeah.
training, it's all different. So, exercising a little bit of how to
And
be.
I'd say for us, and us as in like everyone,
Hmm.
we live in such a world of like, social media and comparing and everything. It's like never been harder to not be like that, right?
Yeah,
So, yeah, be kind to yourself, and yeah, we live in a difficult time where you're always getting bombarded by, the best of everyone and the best of blah blah blah. So yeah, just take that step back and understand your life is your life, and it's going to be how it's going to be for you.
yeah, awesome, Matt. Well, thank you so much for jumping on, man. I really appreciate it.
Yeah,
We
no
will have
problem.
to do it again. Hopefully, not a year before in between the next one.
I feel like a year is not a bad time. You can, talk to more interesting people, and
Matt, you're
then
very interesting. Come on.
sometimes. No, you can get some more reps in, and then we'll come back and I'll have some more interesting stuff. I'm not gonna have anything interesting in a couple months. We
Yeah,
gotta, give it some time.
sounds good. All right, thanks, dude.
No problem. Thank you.
Thank you so much again to Matt Sharpe for coming on the episode and allowing me to dive into his life once again on this round two interview. Matt's a great guy. Obviously, really appreciate him taking the time to share some of his beliefs and the opinions that he holds. It is valuable to me because it allows me to have a widening or wider perspective on things, and I really do appreciate that. Leaving you with a little bit of advice that he gave us when asking how to balance the different aspects of life. Take a step back, look at things, have a little self awareness, and don't try to copy necessarily what other people are doing. Try to find a algorithm that works specifically to your life that adds the most value to those around you. If you made it to this point in the podcast, though, just want to say thank you so much. Really appreciate it. If you are watching on YouTube, if you could like, comment, subscribe. If you are listening on any of the podcast platforms, if you could also like or follow, subscribe to that podcast, and leave a review if you have not already. That really does help continue to grow the show. You can follow us on Instagram. All of those links are in the show notes. If you want to sign up for the newsletter as well, that is also in the show notes below. Thank you guys so much, and we will catch you in the next one.